20 minutes for these reflections. Thank you.
I'd like to begin, and the thing that struck me particularly was the sound and the whole essence of healing. So I would like to just begin by letting the Zen bell ring out, let it come towards you, and as it comes towards you, to include each of you in the circle of sound that you are receiving as we begin. And then I'll start reflecting for it. I'd like to start not in the order that we presented the films, but in the order that struck me first, which was the first one in terms of connection to the sound, Guadalupe Maradilla, and the sound of healing. What particularly struck me immediately was the fact that he had the name Guadalupe. That was curious to me, okay, because that certainly would be very significant, particularly significant from the perspective of what the Guadalupe of Mexico stands for. And so I was informed that the name was taken on, and it makes sense when you listen to his story and his connection to his life and to the aspect of healing from his cancer through the sound. So that when we look at the fact that he was born on 12/12, that actually is also the significant feast of the goddess of the Virgin Mary in the Catholic tradition for his birth. So 12/12 was also his birth. So it connects to the name that he chose for himself, connecting to the goddess of Mexico and to the Americas themselves, because one of the popes actually named the goddess of Guadalupe for the Americas. So that struck me right away. And the symbol and the symbol of Guadalupe also connects to the meaning of appealing to the poor. Okay, and so when we look at him and we look at it from the perspective of the opposites, all right, and what he actually had to go through at his early life, the opposite of having a normal childhood up until the age of 4, and then things transition into the war, and how significant and terrible that particular situation was. And then he is sent at the age of 8, and he has to trek through different places before he gets to where he's going to land. So it does connect to him symbolically in terms of his connection to those that are marginalized, okay, or to the poor of spirit, or the poor in body, and poor with all of the Americans, as the title has identified. So we start out with this, I believe, the archetypal mother, which somehow mothers him throughout the stages of his life. And this archetypal mother provides him with life-giving waters where he can connect to, and also, once he does connect, receive, and then gives back. All right, the connection also, he's got a new relationship with the self, as Jung would say, on this hero's journey. And this new connection to the self then helps him go forward and bring it forth with himself to the others that he's now healing. So we have that sound bath. Okay, how wonderful, just the way he describes it, the sound bath of the healing sounds, which definitely do have the capacity to heal, and are modalities that can be used for healing. And obviously he has a new relationship to the self. And has now given forth this particular healing. Now, the connection with the last film, A Hand to Hold, also brought me to the symbol of the hands and how much one can give forth with your hands and how easy it is to touch. And then we connect with the tension of opposites of what we've gone through in terms of the pandemic, where we were in one place before, and then we become a member of another community where we can't touch, we can't heal in that way through touch, and how significant it became for each individual to have the touch. All right, people became much more aware. Some had more issues, more psychological issues than others, because of being taken away from loved ones and being isolated. All right, and you see with this isolation again that desire to be healed, and on this journey, which we've all been part of in terms of this 2.5 years on being part of this pandemic experience of the opposites of where life was one way and now we have a lot of chaos and change, isolation. And yet in that last film, The Hand to Hold, we have the need for touch, which the mother gives so freely. So again, we have that archetypal mother, a positive mother figure for the child. And in the beginning, they connect with each other through the hand holding. And you can see the joy and the excitement on their faces. What happens at the end is she goes off and she's on the other side. Okay? And the first thing that struck me was, oh, there go the hand holding. But what connects to, in a way, Jung is that similar to an analytic experience, that you have been held, you have been in a container, you have been, in a sense, internalizing all of the different elements of connection and relationship to the point where one can walk off and be by themselves, knowing that they did have the hand holding and that the hand holding was very much significant to the point where I now have the container within myself and I now can go forward. That first film allowed, we have the different scenes, the juxtaposition of these wildflowers that are growing, that they weren't allowed to grow prior to the pandemic, and nobody noticed that they were growing wild, right? And you've got those up against the scenes where there's the desolation, right? And then you've got these beautiful flowers and beautiful greenery that's springing up. And there's a surprise to that. Now, the thing that struck me with that was the surprise of the shadow, right? The surprise of the shadow. In this, we have this juxtaposition of the beauty of the flowers just coming up freely, and you have the other scenes of desolation, okay? And yet there's this surprise when it comes through that we recognize that there maybe is something opposite to what we're actually seeing, and it's only then when we can begin to integrate, whether it's a positive shadow or not so positive shadow. The flowers are running wild. That shadow can run wild within ourselves too.
Hold on.
And it may also appear to be positive, but at some point we can have also the destruction. And if the destruction is not taken seriously, we can then have things taken apart. So the essence of what Jung was saying is to pay attention, okay? To pay attention, to integrate, and to watch what's going on in the unconscious, so that it doesn't take you over. And so the essence of the healing from the first film that I talked about, we have fourth grade coming out of particularly that essence of silence and the need for growth. In that second film, you also see the mandala several different ways and several different forms. And the mandala is the Sanskrit word for circle. We know that Jung, in his Red Book, began to draw mandalas. And in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, he talks about the um, finding of the mandala and found that that was the essence and the transformation that could help and assist one through their hero's journey, through their individuation process. So in that last film, The Hands to Hold, coming out of the pandemic, obviously the importance of holding hands in the film from Guadalupe, what he was able to do with his hands, and in the allowed, what comes up freely, and hands to pick or not pick, to listen or not to listen. And all of that brings us to that whole idea of the opposites. So to continue to think about being bathed in that sound, the healing sound, and allow that healing sound to kind of move through you to your hands so that your hands then on your hero's journey can go out and touch and heal. And so his trauma was held in his stomach, and his stomach cancer came forth. But through movement, he was able to again connect with himself and find ways to go forward and heal. Those are my primary thoughts when I looked at this from a Jungian perspective.
Thank you, Jane. Heidi, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Jane. The theme for our films tonight, the tension of opposites in times of change, has guided my thoughts. The concept of the tension of opposites is a core concept in Jungian thought. It is really a concept worth contemplating, as rationally alone it cannot be grasped. It means the opposite, the other side, so to speak, is always present by implication, even if entirely dissociated, repressed, or projected onto another. Implicit in our theme is the assumption that we live indeed in times of change. Was there ever a period of time that was not subject to inceptions, welcomed or not? Even so, it appears to many that time has sped up and that a breaking up, a breaking down of familiar structures is happening with an ever increasing speed. One thing is certain. In times of change, drastic changes, unexpected changes, the opposites are harder and harder to hold together. The projections onto the other are getting fiercer, and collectively, the risk of moving into the one-sidedness of fundamentalism or other isms is at its highest. A tendency that is hard to ignore all around us. One of the recent inceptions when nature threw a wrench in our plans was the pandemic, to which our first film, Aloud, speaks. During the COVID pandemic, many of us found ourselves in forced situations. My professional life changed. Gone were the meetings in person, replaced by the strange new reality of Zoom meetings. What a blow to the collective Western ego to be brought to its knees by a tiny little virus. Nature always has the last word. Aloud takes us to this recent past of the COVID crisis. It takes us to the time of the lockdown when many of us found ourselves in involuntary isolation and forced introspection. The film shows us what can happen when things are allowed, when the conscious mind allows, when it does not fight the mirror of introspection, suddenly emptied of all the outer distractions. In the film, I followed a gentle, soft voice as she guided us through abandoned streets and delights in the life that emerges. She discovers that weeds are friends. I'm reminded of my own criteria when it comes to weeds in my garden. What makes me decide what shall live or die? What are the weeds, not only in my outer, but also my inner landscape? I'm looking at the weed as an image brought forth by nature of the shadowy, unwanted aspects of ourselves. The film takes us to a place, or rather a state of mind, an attitude, where what is judged as inferior is welcomed by the softest of voices as we follow the narrator through empty, often desolate streets. The softness of the narrator's voice takes me to the second film, about the healing power of sound and the patterns of emerging mandalas within the artist's practice. It is the story of a very particular, remarkable person, a formerly undocumented immigrant, a refugee rather, from El Salvador. In the political rhetoric of our times, it's not hard to see how easily the projection of the unwanted other, the unwanted tweed, can fall on the refugee, the undocumented immigrant. But within the context of the film, the artist, Guadalupe Maravilla, also becomes an archetypal image of the wounded healer. I wondered how the artist reconciled the tension between the expectation of something special to occur and then life happened with all its shattering reality. The artist knew about his ancestral history and the mythology of the Mayas and their predictions about 2012. And being born on December 12th, he was anticipating a special event to happen. And then that very day turned out to be the day of his cancer diagnosis. Guadalupe talks about the healing power of rituals. One statement stood out for me. He said, "I'm not interested in imitating my ancestors' rituals. I'm reminded of the importance of understanding and being rooted in one's own tradition, yet not blindly repeating rituals from times long gone, but to infuse them with one's own energy and imagination and only therefore make them alive." Sound takes us back to our deepest roots. Sound waves have shaped the universe as we know it. We all know the power of music and sound. Sound is everywhere, everywhere in the universe. It is literally filled with sounds, at least physicists and cosmologists tell us so. I'm thinking of the relationship between sound, listening, and hearing. What is it in us, in me, that allows for hearing? I'm thinking of the symbolism of the ear. Within Christian mythology, the image of the Annunciation comes to mind. What did Mary hear when the angel appeared? What are we willing to hear? It can be frightening to hear the whispers from the other side. "Fear not," were reportedly the first words received. How to find the right relationship to fear, I believe, is one of the great mysteries in life. I propose our third film sheds a little light on that mystery. We all may need a hand to hold it. On the outer level, we can think of the need for community and kinship among all creatures. On a human developmental level, the film may speak to the need for adequate, good enough mothering to form a secure attachment in life. But this film is an animation, pointing towards that it does not address an idealized form of mothering and therefore creating guilt in mothers for never living up to it, but rather shows a model of how to move towards a secure attachment to life itself, which in itself is a lifelong practice. A process where mother with the capital M, becomes the center, the goddess, where mother becomes soul or psyche, or however we want to name her, that allows for an understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, of the dark and light intertwined, where our hand feels held by a center while we are stretching our own ability to reach into the unknown in times of change.